Let's be honest, usually, when you see free comedy movies on YouTube, it's a graveyard of bad stand-up specials and movies that were filmed on a toaster. But every once in a while, the algorithm glitches, or more accurately, the public domain gods smile upon us, and we get access to absolute gold. I am talking about legitimate Hollywood classics, cult favorites that launched careers, and some of the funniest physical comedy ever recorded, all sitting there for $0. I have compiled a list of 20 premium comedies that feel like they should be behind a paywall. We've got Buster Keaton risking his life for a laugh, Jack Nicholson's bizarre first role, and the only movie where John Wayne engages in a massive mud fight. These aren't just free movies, these are pieces of cinema history that are criminally easy to watch. Let's get into the list. We are kicking this off with a heavy dose of Italian chaos. Crimebusters stars the legendary duo Terence Hill and Bud Spencer, and if you haven't seen one of their movies, you are in for a treat. They were the biggest stars in Europe in the 70s, famous for their slapstick brawls. In this movie, they play two unemployed guys who plan to rob a supermarket, but through a series of increasingly stupid misunderstandings, they accidentally walk into a police recruitment center and end up joining the force. Instead of fighting the law, they become the law, but they do it in the most violent way possible. The charm of this movie is the fight choreography. It's not bloody or gritty, it's like a live-action cartoon. Bud Spencer, who is built like a grizzly bear, usually just hammers people into the ground with a single punch, while Terence Hill flips around like an acrobat. The sound effects are loud, the dubbing is hilarious, and the chemistry between the two leads is undeniable. It's a mindless, feel-good action comedy that feels like Starsky and Hutch if they were both insane. You usually associate John Wayne with gritty westerns, where he shoots first and asks questions later. But McLintock is the Duke letting his hair down and having a blast. This is essentially a western retelling of Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. Wayne plays G.W. McLintock, a wealthy cattle baron whose estranged wife, played by the fiery Maureen O'Hara, returns to town to divorce him. What follows is a battle of the sexes that escalates into total anarchy. The highlight of this film, and the reason it's worth watching, is the finale. It features one of the biggest, longest, and messiest mud fights in cinema history. The entire town slides down a clay embankment into a mud pit, and watching John Wayne slip and slide while punching people is pure joy. It's loud, boisterous, and politically incorrect in that specific 1960s way, but the chemistry between Wayne and O'Hara is electric. They genuinely look like they are having the time of their lives tormenting each other. Before the hit Broadway musical and the Rick Moranis movie with the singing plant, there was this gritty, low-budget black comedy by the king of B-movies, Roger Corman. Legend has it that Corman shot this entire film in 2 days and one night on a leftover set from another movie. The story is the same one you know. Seymour, a clumsy florist, raises a plant that feeds on human blood. But this version is darker, weirder, and feels more like a twisted Twilight Zone episode. The main reason to watch this version is for a young Jack Nicholson. He has a small but unforgettable role as Wilberforce, a masochistic dental patient who actually enjoys the pain of the drill. Seeing a baby-faced Nicholson already channeling that manic energy he would later become famous for is worth the price of admission alone. The plant, Audrey Jr., is clearly a puppet, and the special effects are cheap, but the script is surprisingly sharp and funny. It's a fascinating look at how a simple B-movie idea can spawn a massive cultural phenomenon. Bob Hope was the master of the cowardly hero archetype, and my favorite brunette is him at his absolute peak. He plays a baby photographer who dreams of being a tough guy private detective like Alan Ladd, who actually makes a cameo. Through a case of mistaken identity, he gets hired by a femme fatale to find a missing baron, plunging him into a genuine noir mystery involving murder, insane asylums, and secret maps. This movie is a brilliant parody of the noir genre that was popular at the time. Hope is constantly breaking the fourth wall, looking directly at the camera with that confused expression when things go wrong. It also stars the legendary Peter Lorre as the villain's henchman, and watching him play the straight man to Bob Hope's antics is hilarious. It manages to be a genuinely suspenseful mystery while also being a laugh-out-loud comedy. If you want to see where modern comedians get their timing from, study Bob Hope in this movie. This is arguably the most famous bad movie of all time. Originally titled Tell Your Children, this was produced as a serious propaganda film to warn parents about the new drug menace sweeping the nation, marijuana. The film depicts high school students who take one puff of a joint and instantly turn into psychotic murderers, piano players who laugh maniacally, and people who hallucinate wildly. It's intended to be a terrifying warning, but today, it is a hysterical comedy. The acting is so over the top, with eyes bulging and actors throwing themselves around the room, that it plays like a sketch comedy show. It became a massive cult hit in the 1970s when college students started watching it ironically. Watching Reefer Madness is a fascinating lesson in hysteria and propaganda, but mostly, it's just funny to see how disconnected the filmmakers were from reality. It's the ultimate so bad it's good experience. Danny Kaye was a comedic genius who doesn't get talked about enough today. He was like Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, and a Broadway singer all rolled into one. In The Inspector General, he plays a bumbling, illiterate stooge from a traveling medicine show who wanders into a corrupt town. The town officials mistake him for the Emperor's Inspector General, who is traveling in disguise to root out corruption. Terrified of being exposed, the officials start bribing and pampering him while he has no idea what is going on. The movie is a showcase for Kaye's physical comedy and his patter songs, rapid-fire musical numbers, where he rhymes dozens of words in seconds. The scene where he tries to eat a meal while corrupt officials try to poison him is a masterclass in timing. The Technicolor is vibrant, the costumes are lavish, and the sheer energy Kaye brings to the screen is infectious. It's a wholesome, chaotic musical comedy that feels like a live-action cartoon. You cannot talk about classic comedy without mentioning The Road to movies. Bob Hope and Bing Crosby made a series of these films where they play con men traveling to exotic locations, chasing Dorothy Lamour, and getting into trouble. Road to Bali is the sixth in the series and the only one filmed in color. They play two vaudeville performers who have to leave Australia in a hurry to avoid shotgun weddings, ending up on an island where they dive for treasure and fight a giant squid. The plot doesn't matter. The entire movie is just an excuse for Hope and Crosby to roast each other. They constantly break character, make fun of the script, and reference the fact that they are in a movie. At one point, a character starts to sing, and Bob Hope looks at the camera and says, "He's gonna sing, folks. Now's the time to go out and get the popcorn." It feels incredibly modern because of how meta it is. Plus, you get to hear Bing Crosby's velvet voice in glorious Technicolor. If you only watch one movie on this list, make it this one. Buster Keaton is the god of stunt work, and Steamboat Bill Jr. contains the most famous and dangerous stunt in cinema history. Keaton plays the effeminate ukulele-playing son of a rough-and-tumble riverboat captain. His father is embarrassed by him, but when a cyclone hits the town, the son has to step up and save the day. The final 20 minutes of this movie are breathtaking. A massive hurricane destroys the town, and Keaton performs all the stunts himself with no CGI and no safety wires. The legendary shot happens when the entire front facade of a two-story house, weighing 2 tons, falls directly on top of him. He survives only because he is standing in the exact spot where the open attic window lands around him. If he had been 2 inches to the left or right, he would have been crushed to death instantly. It is a moment of pure cinematic magic that still stops your heart 100 years later. Before they broke up and became bitter rivals, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis were the biggest comedy duo on the planet. At War with the Army was their first movie together, and it captures exactly why their dynamic works so well. Dean Martin plays the cool, smooth-talking sergeant who is trying to record a song and romance the ladies. Jerry Lewis plays the chaotic, bumbling private who can't do anything right and makes Dean's life a living hell. The plot is barely there. It's mostly a series of sketches set on an army base, but watching Jerry Lewis is mesmerizing. He is a rubber-faced agent of chaos. The scene where he tries to use a soda machine that keeps malfunctioning is a brilliant piece of physical comedy. Meanwhile, Dean Martin provides the smooth vocals and the straight man reactions. It's a great snapshot of 1950s comedy and the birth of a partnership that defined a decade. If you like movies with fast dialogue, the front page is The Speed Champion. Based on a hit Broadway play, this screwball comedy is set in the press room of a criminal court in Chicago. Adolphe Menjou plays a ruthless newspaper editor who will do anything to keep his star reporter, played by Pat O'Brien, from quitting to get married. When a convicted murderer escapes custody and hides in the press room, the two newsmen smell the scoop of a lifetime and hide him in a roll-top desk. The dialogue in this movie moves at 100 miles an hour. Characters talk over each other, shout into telephones, and trade insults with rapid-fire precision. It's a cynical, biting satire of the journalism industry that feels surprisingly modern. It shows reporters as ambulance chasers who don't care about the truth, only the headline. It's chaotic, loud, and incredibly funny if you can keep up with the pace. Laurel and Hardy are the template for every fat guy, skinny guy comedy duo that followed. In The Flying Deuces, they are on vacation in Paris. Oliver Hardy falls in love with the innkeeper's daughter, but when she rejects him, he decides to join the French Foreign Legion to forget her. Naturally, he drags Stan Laurel along with him. As you can imagine, they are terrible soldiers. This movie features one of their most iconic sequences, the Shine On Harvest Moon dance. While they are in the stockade, they start casually dancing to a song being played outside, performing a graceful, synchronized, soft shoe routine that is charming and hilarious. The climax involves them stealing an airplane and flying it despite not knowing how, leading to a crash that has a bizarre supernatural ending involving reincarnation. It's classic slapstick from the masters of the form. This is the first screwball comedy filmed in Technicolor, and it looks gorgeous. Nothing Sacred is a satire about media exploitation that feels like it could have been written today. Frederick March plays a disgraced reporter who needs a big story to save his career. He finds Hazel Flagg, Carol Lombard, a small-town girl who has been diagnosed with radium poisoning and has weeks to live. He brings her to New York City to turn her tragic death into a massive media spectacle. The catch? Hazel finds out she isn't actually dying, but she enjoys the free booze and the fame so much she decides to fake it. Carol Lombard was the queen of screwball comedy, and she is luminous here. She plays Hazel not as a victim, but as a willing participant in the con. The movie mocks everyone: the media for exploiting tragedy, the public for eating it up, and the small-town folks for being greedy. It's sharp, cynical, and features a hilarious scene where the two leads get into a punching match. Life with Father holds the record for the longest-running non-musical play in Broadway history, and the movie adaptation captures that warmth perfectly. William Powell stars as Clarence Day, the patriarch of a wealthy family in 1880s New York. He is loud, demanding, and thinks he runs the house with an iron fist. In reality, his wife Vinnie, played by Irene Dunne, runs everything by quietly manipulating him while letting him think it was his idea. The comedy comes from the low-stakes domestic drama. Father loses his mind over the grocery bills, tries to figure out why the new maid keeps quitting, and refuses to get baptized despite his wife's insistence. It's a gentle, nostalgic comedy about family dynamics. William Powell, usually known for playing cool detectives, is hilarious as the red-headed, blustering father who is constantly confused by his own family. It's a cozy, comfort food kind of movie. This is the weirdest entry on the list, and definitely a hidden gem. Directed by indie legend John Sayles, this is a sci-fi comedy about a mute alien, Joe Morton, who crash lands in Ellis Island and ends up in Harlem. He looks like a black human man, but he has 3 toes and the ability to fix machines with his hands. He is being chased by 2 alien bounty hunters, who are also played by the director and producer. Because the main character can't speak, Joe Morton gives an incredible physical performance, reacting to the strangeness of 1980s New York City with wide eyes and innocence. The movie uses the sci-fi premise to look at race, immigration, and urban life. It's funny, observant, and deeply original. It feels like a low-budget indie version of E.T., mixed with a social satire. The scene where he discovers a video game arcade and uses his powers to win is a classic 80s moment. Based on the novel The G-String Murders written by actual burlesque legend Gypsy Rose Lee, this is a murder mystery set backstage at a burlesque theater. Barbara Stanwyck stars as Dixie Daisy, the star performer who has to turn detective when the other strippers start getting strangled with their own G-strings. This movie is fascinating because it gives you a peek into the world of 1940s burlesque. It's not sleazy, it's actually quite gritty, and focuses on the working conditions of the dancers. The dialogue is snappy and full of backstage slang. Barbara Stanwyck is, as always, a powerhouse. She is tough, smart, and refuses to be a victim. It's a campy, fun whodunit with great costumes and a unique setting that sets it apart from your standard noir mystery. Another Roger Corman classic, this one is a satire of the beatnik culture of the late 50s. Walter Paisley is a socially awkward, dim-witted busboy at a hipster coffee shop. He desperately wants to be an artist like the cool poets and painters who hang out there, but he has no talent. One day, he accidentally kills his landlady's cat. Panicking, he covers the cat in clay and presents it as a sculpture. The hipsters love it, calling it a masterpiece of realism. Walter realizes that the only way to keep his fame is to keep killing things and eventually people to cover them in clay. It's a dark comedy that mocks the pretentiousness of the art world. The beatnik dialogue is hilarious, full of daddy-o and abstract poetry that means nothing. It's a short, punchy movie that feels like a twisted precursor to Little Shop of Horrors. This movie is in the So Bad It's Good Hall of Fame. The plot is exactly what the title says. The children of Mars are depressed because they watch too much Earth television and want presents. So, the Martian leaders fly to Earth, kidnap Santa Claus, and force him to set up a toy factory on Mars. Everything about this movie is baffling. The Martians are just guys in green tights with motorcycle helmets painted gold. The robot is a man in a cardboard box. Santa Claus seems weirdly okay with being kidnapped. It also features a very young Pia Zadora as one of the Martian children. It's a train wreck of a movie, but it's undeniably entertaining because of how earnest it is. It's a holiday staple for people who like their Christmas movies with a side of accidental surrealism. If you have ever watched Mystery Science Theater 3000, you know this movie. It stars Richard Kiel, who would later play Jaws in the James Bond movies, as a giant caveman living in the California desert. A teenage girl stumbles upon him, and he falls in love with her. The movie features the caveman coming to the city, confused by rock and roll music and swimming pools. The acting is wooden, the dialogue is bizarre. The famous line, "Watch out for snakes," is said when there are clearly no snakes, and the production value is non-existent. But Richard Kiel actually tries his best to give the giant some humanity. It's a campy B-movie time capsule of early 60s beach culture clashing with prehistoric nonsense. This is a collision of two worlds, the East Side Kids, also known as the Bowery Boys, and horror legend Bela Lugosi. The East Side Kids were a comedy troupe who made movies about tough street kids getting into trouble. In this one, they buy a fixer-upper house for their friend who is getting married, but the house is supposedly haunted. In reality, it's being used as a hideout by a Nazi spy ring led by Bela Lugosi. Watching Bela Lugosi, a serious actor, try to maintain his dignity while being harassed by a bunch of shouting, slapstick teenagers is hilarious. The movie is barely an hour long and moves at a breakneck pace. It's a mix of spooky house tropes, wartime spy intrigue, and physical comedy. It's a great example of the matinee movies that kids would watch on Saturdays in the 40s. Finally, we have a dramedy starring two absolute legends, James Stewart and Carole Lombard. They play a couple who get married after knowing each other for only one day. The movie follows their first year of marriage as they deal with his meddling mother, financial struggles, and sickness. While it deals with serious themes, the chemistry between Stewart and Lombard makes it sparkle. They are arguably two of the most charming actors to ever live. Seeing a young Jimmy Stewart play a lawyer trying to ask for a raise is painful and hilarious. It's a more grounded, realistic comedy about the struggles of early marriage, but it features that classic golden age of Hollywood polish. It's a sweet, emotional, and genuinely funny look at what happens after the happily ever after. So there you have it, 20 movies that prove you don't need a credit card to access cinema history. Whether you want to see Buster Keaton almost die for a stunt or just watch Martians kidnap Santa Claus, YouTube has you covered.